السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما، وأصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue with the lessons that we've began going through the book, which is called تعليم المتعلم طريق التعلم, or teaching the learner or educating the learner about the path or the way to seek knowledge. The book written by Imam Abdirahman alayhi rahmatullah. And in our last class, we finished the first chapter after the introduction, and that was the chapter that was speaking about the reality of knowledge and the reality of fiqh and the virtues of knowledge and understanding. Inshallah ta'ala, today we're going to go through the next chapter, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, which is titled فصل في النية في حال التعلم, or the chapter about the intention while in the condition or in the state of learning. So what is the state of one's intention? What should the intention of the person be in their quest or in their path to seeking knowledge? And inshallah for tonight we'll just do that one chapter, because again I was delayed due to something that I did not see coming, so forgive me for that. So we'll finish this chapter and then we'll be back on Wednesday night, inshallah ta'ala, to continue, bi'idhnillah. طيب. Inshallah tonight Ilyas will be our qari, فليتفضل شيخ.
فصل في النية في حال التعلم. ثم لا بد له من النية في زمان التعلم العلمي، إذا النية هي الأصل في جميع الأفعال، لقوله عليه السلام: إنما الأعمال بالنيات، حديث صحيح عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. كم من عمل يتصور بصورة عمل دنيا ثم يصير بحسن النية من أعمال الآخرة، وكم من عمل يتصور بصورة عمل الآخرة ثم يصير من أعمال الدنيا بسوء النية.
نعم. So the Shaykh begins, rahimahullah ta'ala, by saying that it is important. He says, ثم لا بد له من نية من النية في زمان تعلم العلم. That it is imperative for the student of knowledge to to have the intention while they're seeking knowledge. So they have to have the intention while they're seeking knowledge. The question now is, what is it that the student of knowledge intends when they're studying? What is your intention supposed to be about? طيب, and the foundation, there are 4 foundations or 4 usul that are the foundations of the intention for the talibul ilm. طيب, so those 4, number 1 is نية رفع الجهل عن نفسه. Number 1, you have to have the intention of lifting off of yourself ignorance. That's number 1. نية رفع الجهل عن نفسه. Second foundation is نية رفع الجهل عن غيره. The intention of lifting off ignorance off of others. So number 1, you are studying and you're learning and you're seeking knowledge to lift ignorance off of yourself, to grant yourself understanding of the religion, to be given or to receive or to be somebody who has understanding of the religion for themselves, to lift off jahl off of themselves. Secondly, to lift off jahl off of others and ignorance off of others, to educate others about what you have learned. Third foundation is نية حفظ العلم وصيانته من الضياع. نية حفظ العلم وصيانته من الضياع, which means you have to have the intention of preservation or preserving the knowledge and protecting it from being lost. So the ilm has to be preserved. And who is it that preserves the knowledge so that it can be passed on to others? It is the people of knowledge and the scholars and the people and the students of knowledge. That has to be part of your intention, that you are servicing the deen by preserving the religion for others to benefit from, whether it's by you memorizing it, by you writing it, by you educating others so that they can educate others. Through that, the deen, the ilm, is preserved. And lastly, niyatul amali bil ilmi, that you intend the application of that knowledge. Niyatu al-amali bil ilmi. So those four are what we can consider the foundations of the niyyah of the talib al-ilm and the seeking knowledge. Okay? And Shaykh Salih al-Usaymi, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he, based on those four, he made these lines of poetry where he says, and write this down, he says, وَنِيَّةٌ لِلْعِلْمِ رَفْعُ الْجَهْلِ عَمْ وَنِيَّةٌ لِلْعِلْمِ رَفْعُ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ فغيره من النسم. ونية للعلم رفع الجهل عن نفسه فغيره من النسم. وبعده التحصين للعلوم من the napkins. وبعده التحصين للعلوم من ضياعها وعمل به زك. I'll repeat it again. ونية للعلم رفع الجهل عن نفسه فغيره من النسم. ونية للعلم رفع الجهل عن نفسه فغيره من النسم. وبعده التحصين للعلوم من ضياعها وعمل به زك. He says وَنِيَّةٌ لِلْعِلْمِ, and the intention for knowledge is رَفْعُ الْجَهْلِ lifting off ignorance off of the self. Here بمعنى النفس. The meaning of is النفس, يعني رفع الجهل عن نفسي. طيب, so نعم, عفوا, forgive me. النسم means النفس. So رفع الجهل يعني means عموم, يعني الشمول, in general, right? Complete lifting off of ignorance off of the individual, عن نفسه, of the person, فغيره من النسم, and also lifting off ignorance off of other people or other يعني souls, right? So that first line covers the first two of the four. We said the intention number one is what? Lifting off ignorance off of yourself, and secondly, lifting off ignorance off of others. وَنِيَّةٌ لِلْعِلْمِ رَفْعُ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ فَغَيْرِهِ مِنَ النَّسَمِ. So to totally lift off ignorance off of themselves and off of others. وَبَعْدَهُ التَّحْصِينُ لِلْعُلُومِ مِنْ ضَيَاعِهَا. That's the third one, right? And afterwards, the intention is tahseen means to protect, right? To preserve, to protection, hisn, right? Tahseen is to protect the knowledge or the sciences from ضياع. ضياع means for it to be lost. طيب وبعده التحصين للعلوم من ضياعها وعمل به زكين. And the fourth one is what? The intention to implement the knowledge. So the four foundations of the niyyah of seeking knowledge. Number one is the intention of رفع الجهل عن نفس, to lift off ignorance off the individual self. Secondly, to lift off ignorance off of others. Thirdly, to preserve the knowledge and protect it from it being lost or wasted. And lastly, for the ulum or the knowledge to be implemented and to be put to action. طيب. So that is what we're talking about. Those are the foundations, the usul of the niyyah that the talibul ilm or the student of knowledge is intending. Now there might be some other intentions, as the Shaykh will mention in the chapter, but those all come, or we can consider them to be taba'. They come following these four. These four are really the foundation, right? So when you are rectifying your intention, why am I seeking beneficial knowledge? Number 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the usul. طيب. So he says, ثم لا بد من النية في زمان تعلم العلم. That it is imperative that the student of knowledge or the individual is somebody that has the intention in the time when they're seeking knowledge. إذ النية هي الأصل في جميع الأفعال. For the intention is the foundation for all actions. Every amal that you do has to be one that is based on a niyyah. Right? And he brought the hadith that's authentic of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. That indeed actions are based upon intentions. طيب. And that hadith is sahih. من حديث عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه. Then the Shaykh says, كم من عمل يتصور بصورة عمل الدنيا. كم من عمل, how many actions يتصور بصورة عمل الدنيا, that it would seem to be, or the look, or the how this intention, how this action seems to be, it looks like it's an action from the actions of the dunya. ثم يصير بحسن النية من أعمال الآخرة. But that act that seems to be in its apparent form a deed, due to an intention that is good, becomes what? From the actions of the akhirah. وكم من عمل يتصور بصورة عمل الآخرة ثم يصير من أعمال الدنيا بسوء النية. And how many actions do we have, or does it seem that it looks like from the actions of the afterlife? However, due to an evil intention, it becomes what? He says, from the a'mal al-dunya, from the actions of the dunya. طيب. In the first example, or in the first statement, what is the Shaykh referring to? Naam. Okay, good. So that's an example, right? But what is he referring to? Anybody can tell me, before giving examples, what is he saying? I want you to understand what he's saying. Naam. Fadal, go ahead. So it's an intention for an action that is what? Mubah. Right? So you have a'mal that are permissible, that would naturally be considered to be from the actions of the dunya. You would not necessarily look at it as an ibadah. Right? But because of the niyyah, it becomes from the a'mal al-akhirah. Now give me some examples. Naam. Okay, so going to work but having good intention. Give me some more basic examples. Naam. Eating food. That's a great example. Eating food is something that you do because you have to survive. But your intention could be that I am eating this food so that I can have strength to do that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Then you get rewarded. Give me another example. Sleeping. Sleeping is another example. That you intend before going to sleep that you're resting so that you can get up and engage in ibadah. Then guess what? You are now being rewarded, and there's ajr being recorded for you as you sleep. Right? And this is why you find some of the ulama of the past, they would mention about the different ways that they would maximize, right, these opportunities in gaining reward. I forget who the scholar was when he said that I hope that I get more reward, right, in my sleep than I do while I'm up. What is he talking about? He's talking about that intention, right? So the people who were of the past, and even those who are serious about who their mindset is geared towards the akhirah, then they're looking at what possible opportunity can I have to maximize what I can cash in the akhirah, right? Many of us were dunya oriented, so we know all of the ways to make an extra buck, make an extra living, find a deal here, find a deal there, save money here. We know all the tricks and the trades. But we don't necessarily give any importance to thinking about how can I maximize getting as much reward as possible, and how can I minimize, right, getting or doing acts going to impact my akhirah. But that requires ilm, and we mentioned that last week. Right? It requires ilm for you to understand what it is that you can do that is going to increase you in reward, and what is it that you can do that's going to be a waste of time. So it's not for you to say, oh, I'm just going to put in the work, I'm going to work hard and I have sincere intentions, if the amal that you're doing is one that is not correct or not in line with the sunnah. Right? You can't just make things up and say, I'm going to get reward for it. Right? But here the Shaykh is giving us an example of how, the importance of the niyyah. Right? The niyyah is one in which some action that is an action that is mubah can be something that is turned to something that you're being rewarded for because of the intention. Two people are sleeping, are taking a nap, and one, there's nothing being recorded for him because he just took a nap because he wants to just rest. And the other one, because he had a niyyah to rest so that he can get up and engage in ibadah, he's getting ajr while he's sleeping. Right? That's the difference between the intention. That's why in the example of Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned that one made hijrah for Allah and His Messenger, while the other one made hijrah for some dunya purpose. Nothing haram. Married, moving for business. But they did the exact same amal, but the outcome is different because of the intention. And the Shaykh mentions in the next phrase the opposite. Okay, tell me, let's talk about that. An amal that we think is an amal of the akhirah, but then it becomes, he says, because of the bad intention, an amal of the dunya. What is he referring to? Na'am. Hey, na'am. Mumtaz. Right? Jazakallah khair. So you're doing an act that is supposed to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake, but your intention is for other than Allah. I mentioned the first three that are thrown in the hellfire, right? And the common denominator in those three was what? Their intentions were not sincerely for Allah. They were doing it so they can get accolades and brownie points and appreciation from people. Right? So that ibadah that you're doing, that you're supposed to do sincerely for Allah, the niyyah that is corrupted that action and made it one that is not accepted. Rather, it's thrown back. In the case of the salah, as the hadith mentioned, it doesn't even go up. Right? And the other a'mal, they're rendered null and void. You got what you wanted. You got the praises, mashallah, fulan is an alim, fulan is an abid, fulan he's a generous, you got what you got in the dunya. طيب? So there's no benefit from that. And the distinction between the two is what? An-niyyah. طيب. نعم. وينبغي أن ينوي. فضل.
أحسن الله إليكم. وينبغي أن ينوي المتعلم بطلب العلم رضا الله والدار الآخرة وإزالة الجهل عن نفسه وعن سائر الجهال وإحياء الدين وإبقاء الإسلام، فإن بقاء الإسلام بالعلم ولا يصح الزهد والتقوى مع الجهل. وأنشدنا الشيخ والإمام الأجل الأستاذ برهان الدين صاحب الهداية لبعضهم: فساد كبير عالم متهتك وأكبر منه جاهل متنسك، هما فتن للعالمين عظيمة لمن بهما في دينه يتمسك.
نعم. So the Shaykh, he then continues and he says وينبغي أن ينوي المتعلم بطلب العلم رضا الله والدار الآخرة. He says, number one, the intention, the student of knowledge, the one who's learning, he should intend in his seeking of knowledge رضا الله, the pleasure of Allah, والدار الآخرة, and achieving success in the afterlife. That should be your intention. The Shaykh begins by saying, طيب, that you're doing this for Allah's pleasure, not for anybody else's pleasure, but the pleasure of Allah, and to attain reward in the afterlife. وَإِزَالَةَ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ, and to remove ignorance off of yourself. We mentioned that in the qawaid, right? Removing off ignorance off of yourself. وَعَنْ سَائِرِ الْجُهَالِ, and to remove ignorance off of the rest of those who are ignorant. رَفْعُ الْجَهْلِ عَنْ غَيْرِهِ, to lift off ignorance off of yourself, and to lift off ignorance off of others. وَإِحْيَاءُ الدِّينِ, and to revive the deen. وَإِبْقَاءَ الْإِسْلَامِ فَإِنَّ إِبْقَاءَ الْإِسْلَامِ بِالْعِلْمِ. He says, and for Islam to remain, for the remainder of Islam, or Islam remaining, is predicated on knowledge. And for Islam to spread, there has to be one that is based on knowledge. So this is in line with the principle that we mentioned, which is what? حفظ العلم, right? The preservation of the knowledge, so that others can benefit from it. Correct? And this is what the ulama have been doing. We're sitting here and we quote and we read books of ulama written hundreds of years ago, right? In some scenarios even 1,000 years ago. But we're still benefiting from that knowledge. And that knowledge will continue to be benefited by others so long as there are people who are preserving that by, educating others, making sure the books are preserved, that people can access it, that people can read it, وهكذا. طيب? Because we have all of these ulum that we have preserved. I mean, there's many other books of knowledge that have been lost. Right? There are. That's why sometimes you'll see, you'll read a biography of the Sheikh in a book. He says he wrote this book and that book, and then the scholars will say, well, that book it hasn't reached us. It's mafqud, right? It was lost, right? Hundreds, if not thousands of books were lost in Baghdad, in the major libraries in Baghdad when the Mongols invaded Baghdad. But ومع ذلك, we still have a lot of ulum of the ulama that have been preserved. That's from the intention that the talib al-ilm should intend is the preservation of the ilm. And the preservation of the deen is through the preservation of knowledge. Right? Again, that shows the sharaf of the knowledge and the virtue of the knowledge. He says, وَلَا يَصِحُ الزُّهْدُ وَالتَّقْوَى مَعَ الْجَهْلِ. He says, and az-zuhd, being ascetic, and taqwa, fearing Allah and staying away from His prohibitions and doing His commandments, is not acceptable with ignorance. Right? How do you have taqwa in Allah? And by staying away from Allah's prohibitions and doing what Allah has commanded, if you don't know what Allah has commanded and what Allah has prohibited. Kayf? Right? That's why some of the scholars, they would say, right? كيف يتقي من لا يدري ما يتقي. How does one protect themselves? Right? How does one protect themselves while they don't know what it is that they're protecting themselves from? They don't know what's haram to stay away from. They don't know what's a commandment to do because they don't have the knowledge. So jahl, you cannot be somebody who practices taqwa, somebody who practices zuhud, right? Who is staying away from that which is haram, that is keeping themselves away from those matters that are makruh. How would you do that if you don't even know in the first place and if you're ignorant? It's not practical. طيب. ولا يصح الزهد. Zuhud and taqwa is not accepted or it's not correct with ignorance. بمعنى it requires knowledge. Then he mentioned lines of poetry that was, he mentioned that the sheikh, his sheikh, one of his mashayikh, Burhanuddin, Sahib al-Hidayah. We mentioned at the beginning that al-Hidayah is one of the books of fiqh in the Hanafi madhab. طيب. So he says our sheikh, he read these lines of poetry to us. And the lines are فَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ عَالِمٌ مُتَهَتِّكٌ. He said a major corrupter. And one source of major corruption is number one, عَالِمٌ مُتَهَتِّكٌ, a scholar who has no limits when it comes to disobeying Allah. عِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. He's supposed to be somebody who knows the haqq, but he immerses in doing that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That person is a source of major corruption. Right? وَأَكْبَرُ مِنْهُ جَاهِلٌ مُتَنَسِّكٌ. He says, and even more dangerous or even more corrupt than that is an ignorant person who's trying to do ibadat. He's trying to do ibadah and worship, but he has no knowledge. Right? He's trying to do the manasik and the rituals of the religion bila ilm. That person is a problem. طيب? So the balance always has to be that you have knowledge, right? Correct knowledge, and that knowledge has to be one that is put to action. That knowledge will result to you in doing the act of worship correctly and in staying away from what Allah has prohibited you to stay away from. And that is the path Allah in the Quran mentions. That's the path of those whom Allah is pleased with. Right? In Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? Those whom Allah is pleased with are those whom, what? They have combined between knowing the haqq and doing it and putting it to action. And the other two extremes is what we ask Allah for protection from. Correct? غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Not those whom you are angry with and not those whom are misguided. Who are the ones whom Allah are angry with? We have the hadith that mentions, right, that the Yahud are the maghdubun alayhim, and the Nasara are the dullal that are misguided. Why? What is the characteristic that causes this group to be one whom Allah is angry with and this characteristic group to be characterized as one whom are misguided? Why? Na'am? The Nasara, they engage in ibadah and actions without ilm. What about the other group? They had knowledge, but they didn't apply it. So that applied to them. And Allah mentioned this in the Quran clearly. Right? That Allah sent them anbiya and rusul, and they knew the haqq, but they decided to ignore it and follow their own desires for whatever reason. Well, on the flip side, you had people who did not necessarily have the knowledge of how to properly worship, but they engaged and immersed themselves in trying to do acts of worship. But that didn't benefit them. So the correct middle path is that you do acts of, you have knowledge of the haqq, and that ilm will lead you to do and fulfill the acts based on knowledge. So on one extreme, you have the Shaykh saying, which is a great fasad, alimun mutahattik, a scholar who, but that knowledge didn't benefit him, did it? He's engaging in that which is displeasing to Allah and disobedience to Allah. So he has the knowledge, but he didn't put it to action. And it didn't protect him and prevent him from that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the other side, he said, jahilun mutanassik, an ignorant person who's trying to engage in ibadah. He says, huma fitnatun lil alamina azimatun. He said, those two are a major fitna and a major trial to the creation. Right? They're a great calamity, or they're a great trial to the people and a fitna. Right? لِمَنْ بِهِمَا فِي دِينِهِ يَتَمَسَّكُ. For those who, right, other than those two, right, they are a fitna towards those who want to hold on to their deen and their religion. طيب. So it's important that the Shaykh is saying, and we mentioned it earlier, that the niyyah has to be where one is doing it for Allah's sake and seeking the pleasure of Allah and seeking reward in the afterlife, lifting off ignorance off of themselves, lifting off ignorance off of others, preservation of the religion and preservation of the knowledge, and to put it to action. Right? Those abiyat are indicating the importance of knowledge with practice of that knowledge is that which is beneficial. Right? Not having knowledge and not applying it, and not being somebody that's trying to do actions without knowledge. طيب وينوي به نعم.
أحسن الله عليكم. وينوي به الشكر على نعمة العقل وصحة البدن ولا ينوي به إقبال الناس عليه ولا استجلاب حطام الدنيا والكرامة عند السلطان وغيره.
نعم. He says here, and that the intention of the person should be of the muta'allim, the learner, should be الشكر نعم الشكر على نعمة العقل وصحة البدن, being thankful and grateful to Allah for the blessing of the intellect, of sound intellect, and a healthy body. Right? That those blessings that Allah has given you, because those are blessings that will aid the person in their journey of studying. Sound intellect, strength, right? So showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granting you that as a means of aiding you in your pursuit of knowledge. So the person has to intend thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. And they should not intend, he says, وَلَا يَنْوِي بِهِ إِقْبَالَ النَّاسِ عَلَيْهِ. He should not have the intention of seeking knowledge so that people can turn towards him and come towards him. Right? To get the attention of the people. Right? To get the attention of the people so that they can say, oh, mashallah, so-and-so is knowledgeable, so-and-so speaks very well, so-and-so, he's a great teacher, he's a great person of knowledge. Right? وَلَا اسْتِجْلَابِ حُطَامِ الدُّنْيَا. And also they should not intend their seeking of knowledge to be something that they're going to use as a means of attaining, right, some worldly benefit. Right? Whether it's wealth or status, whatever it might be, that are from the hudud dunya, yani from the desires and the matters that people desire from the worldly matters. You should not use knowledge and seeking knowledge as a means to try to achieve that or attain that. That's what he's saying. وَالْكَرَامَةَ عِنْدَ السُّلْطَانِ وَغَيْرِهِ. And so that you can receive respect and honor, right, by the leaders, the kings, and those who are in charge, or others, people of status and nobility. So your intention should not be that I'm doing this so that people can say, in summary, so-and-so is an alim, so-and-so is a scholar, so-and-so is... That's not your intention, right? And it's important that you see the scholars mentioning this. Why? Because it happens quite often where it's from those things that come along with seeking knowledge and learning and benefiting others, right? It's going to come with it. That's part of the test. Praising, popularity, madri esh, all of those things that you guys all know, right? Especially in the times that we're living in now. Where now everybody's clout chasing. Everybody wants attention, online especially, right? So your intention should not be looking for that, right? That should not be your intention. Now if it comes with it, if it comes along with it, it comes along with it. That's, at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? But you should not be, and this is part of the rectification of a person's intention. When the scholars would say that there's nothing that I would consistently fight myself with or try to cure myself with that is more difficult upon me than what? My niyyah. Right? So do not allow, he's saying, do not allow these worldly, lowly trinkets to be your motivation for seeking knowledge. طيب. وقال محمد بن حسن نعم.
أحسن الله عليكم. وقال محمد بن الحسن رحمة الله عليهما لو كان الناس كلهم عبيدي لأعتقدتهم وتبرأت من ولائهم وذلك لأن من وجد لذة العلم والعمل به قلما يرغب فيما عند الناس.
Look at this. He says, he quotes Muhammad ibn Hassan. We mentioned Muhammad ibn Hassan is from Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, from the major ulama of, from the students of Imam Abu Hanifa. طيب. And from the major scholars of the madhab of the Hanafi madhab. He says, لو كان الناس كلهم عبيدي, if all of the people were my servants, if all of the people were my slaves, لأعتقتهم وتبرأت من ولائهم, I would have freed them all and freed myself from being their masters. Why is he saying that? وذلك لأن من وجد لذة العلم والعمل به قلما يرغب فيما عند الناس. Because if a person truly tastes the sweetness of knowledge and the application of knowledge, then they will have no desire for what the people have, or having authority over people, right? In this case, he's talking about, right? He brought that example as a means of, and this is a dunya thing. Why did people have these servants working for them, to do everything for them, right? It shows their status. It shows that everything's being done for them. Food is being brought for them. They're being served, right? They're being taken care of. They don't have to lift a finger. They don't have to do nothing. It's part of flexing on the dunya that the person has. So he's saying that I would have gotten rid of all of that, whether it's that, or you can even use the example of whatever it might be, wealth, property, whatever. I wouldn't have not been busy with that, because I don't see the attachment to those affairs or to those matters, because of how sweet the taste of ilm and acting upon ilm is. It's far more beloved to me and more superior to me than these dunya, these worldly affairs. طيب وذلك لأن من وجد لذة العلم والعمل به قلما يرغب فيما عند الناس. Once a person really understands the value of knowledge and applying knowledge, then they're not worried about what's in the hands of people. They're not concerned, oh, so-and-so has a car, so-and-so has a nice job, so-and-so is living, so-and-so is doing this, so-and-so. Because you have something more precious in front of you, right? But it only takes a person who has knowledge and understanding to understand the value of ilm, right? Think about this. Just to give you and I've mentioned this example before, right? Think about all the people that you see who have careers and are working, and they spend 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and then everybody's working towards what? 65, right? Or even early retirement, correct? And then once they're retired, khalas. Are they needed in that field anymore? For the most part, no. Maybe some companies might see his value in the knowledge that he has, and maybe utilize him as a consultant or an advisor, or right? Mumkin, if the person, but for the most part, people work until they retire, and then their utility and their usefulness stops there. Now, for some reason, they're at a retirement home. Khalas, you have a PSW worker coming, playing with them, giving them food, changing them. I remember, this is years ago, and I've mentioned this here before, I think. Years ago when I was in high school, we signed up for wanted to do co-op at the hospital. You know co-op in high school? Wanted to do co-op in the hospital. So we did it in summer school. Summer school co-op, hospital, health related. The school ended up registering me at a nursing home. Right? It was a where you have retirement home. It's Bank Street, right across from Lansdowne Park. And so my job for that summer pretty much was I had to entertain, the elders that are being brought to they have their rooms. So I'm not doing any PSW stuff. But what I'm doing, right, I'm not changing anything or none of that. But what I was doing was like they would bring them to like the room where like not, what is it called? Like it's like activity room. So they had like games and whatnot, and so the point of me mentioning this was there was two people that I remember. I like two personalities that were people that were there. I'm sure they probably passed away by now. This was years ago. That really shocked me. One of them was a veteran, retired. He was in the army. He was a soldier, fought in the Second World War, I think, and he was a boxer in the army. I don't know. He saw me and he thought maybe like I could box, and he had amnesia, by the way. Not amnesia. Is it amnesia or what is it called when dementia? He had dementia, so he would remember things and then he would forget things at times. And so he saw me and he had a walker and he's like, yo, you look like you can box. And he invited me to his room and he's showing me his medals that he got in the Second World War, and he has magazines of like boxing and what's it called, Braddock, what is it called, Cinderella Man, and like he was into boxing, right? So that was one guy and I'm thinking in my head, wow, like this guy has achieved all this, but this is where he's at. Khalas. And there was a second guy who even impressed me even more. He couldn't really speak. He was like on his bed. He was like on his way out. He couldn't even speak. But in his room, like he would be brought, I could see like the nurses would give him a lot of care, but in his room he had these frames. Like he had a frame, like a letter from the Prime Minister of Canada, the old Trudeau, the father. He had like a direct letter with his name from the Prime Minister. He had a letter from the Governor General. He had a letter from this. I'm like, who's this guy? So I can see on his wall, there's newspapers on the wall of him with his picture when he was young. So he was he was like one of the like general managers, or like the CEO of the aluminum company, Alcan Aluminum, for like years, retired. So why am I saying this? Like, khalas, their utility ended once they retired. Now compare that to the alim. The alim, the older he gets, his value increases. Is that not the case? Look at our major ulama, the ones that are alive today. Right? Old in age. Shaykh al-Fawzan is how old now? He's past 90-something. Right? Shaykh al-Muhsin Abbad. But despite their age, they're being sought after for their knowledge. Right? Because of their ilm. So why am I mentioning that? To drive the point home of the value of knowledge. If you really understand it and the application of knowledge, it's far more valuable than any dunya you can achieve. Even the person's value will never really go away. They will be sought after and they will be asked for fatwa, and right? And so long as their intellect is sharp, and right? And for the most part, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserves them because of their ibadah, and they're staying away from that which is haram. That Allah preserves them and their strength even in their older age. طيب. نعم. وقال محمد بن الحسن رحمه الله رحمة الله عليه: لو كان الناس كلهم عبيدي لأعتقتهم وتبرأت من ولائهم، وذلك لأن من وجد لذة العلم والعمل به قلما يرغب فيما عند الناس. طيب، أنشدنا الشيخ الإمام الأجل، فضل.
أحسن الله عليكم. أنشدنا الشيخ الإمام الأجل الأستاذ قوام الدين حماد بن إبراهيم بن إسماعيل الصفراء الأنصاري إملاء لأبي حنيفة رحمة الله عليه: من طلب العلم للمعادي فاز بفضل من الرشاد، فيا للخسران طلبه لنيل فضل من العباد. اللهم إلا إذا طلب الجاه للأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر وتنفيذ الحق وإعزاز الدين لنفسه وهواه فيجوز ذلك. أحسن عليكم. لنفسه وهواه فيجوز ذلك.
وإعزاز الدين لا لنفسه.
وإعزاز الدين لا لنفسه وهواه فيجوز ذلك بقدر ما يقيم به الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر.
نعم. So here the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala, he continues, he mentioned some other lines of poetry that he heard from one of his mashayikh who heard it from Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, and the lines are: من طلب العلم للمعادي فاز بفضل من الرشاد فيا لخسران طالبيه لنيل فضل من العباد. He says, whoever seeks knowledge for the afterlife, he will be successful by receiving Allah's virtue, right? And he'll receive virtue and guidance, right? He will receive the virtue of being upon the path of uprightness. فَيَا لِخُسْرَانِ طَالِبِيهِ لِنَيْلِ فَضْلٍ مِنَ الْعِبَادِ. So how lost, or how much has the person lost, the one who seeks it to get some type of virtue from the slaves, from people. Right? So in other words, he's saying that the person who seeks knowledge for the afterlife, right? For the afterlife, for Allah wa dar al-akhirah, then that person is successful. They have taken the path that is upright. And the failure and the loser and the one who's lost, who's seeking knowledge to get some accolades or some acceptance or some type of appreciation from the slaves of Allah, from people. طيب? And then he says, so in other words, he's saying don't seek knowledge to get any type of appreciation or status from the people. Then he says, he makes an exception here and he says, Allahumma illa idha talab al-jah lil-amri bil-ma'ruf wal-nahyi 'anil munkar. Except if he seeks out a position to enjoin good or forbid evil. وَتَنْفِيذِ الْحَقِّ, and to establish or to spread the truth or to establish the truth. وَإِعْزَازِ الدِّينِ, and to bring izzah and honor to the religion. لَا لِنَفْسِهِ وَهَوَاهَا, not for his own self or for his own desires. Right? He's doing it for what? For the religion, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. Not for his own worldly or own personal benefit or desire. He says, فَيَجُوزُ ذَلِكَ بِقَدْرِ مَا يُقِيمُ بِهِ الْأَمْرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيِ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. Then in that case, it's permissible for that person to seek that out to fulfill what is required in terms of enjoining good and forbidding evil. All right? So in other words, what he's saying is that a person's intention is not necessarily for the sake of getting some type of status or whatever it might be, but if that will result in them doing something that will bring some benefit, whether it's enjoining good or forbidding evil or giving nusra to the deen, then you might have to, in some scenarios, present your skill set because you might be qualified to do that. طيب? Allah in the Quran mentioned about Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? اجعلني على خزائن الأرض. Yusuf was the one who requested, right, from the king of Egypt to be in charge of the treasury, correct? He said, make me the one in charge of where the money is being kept, of the finances of the country. And he mentioned why. Inni hafidhun alim. First off, I will take care of the money and I have knowledge about this. I know how to do this. I'm an expert. Right? Wouldn't one say, well, that is showing off and seeking some type of worldly benefit and status? And well, not necessarily, because in this case there is a greater benefit. So that's what, in other words, what he's saying is that might be an exception where that will be, in that situation, it'll be permissible. But like I said earlier, that is not the primary intention of seeking knowledge. Right? So I'm not saying I'm seeking knowledge so that I can be minister so-and-so of the Islamic ministry in government so-and-so, or I can, that's not my objective. My objective is what? Lifting off ignorance off of myself, lifting off ignorance off of others, وهكذا. Getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, preservation of the deen, acting upon the knowledge. That's the foundation. Everything else kind of comes along with it. If you're appointed to be an imam, if you're appointed to have a position, whatever it might be, khair. But that's not the goal. Does that make sense? طيب. وينبغي, continue.
أحسن عليكم. وينبغي لطالب العلم أن يتفكر في ذلك فإنه يتعلم العلم بجهد كثير فلا يسرفه إلى الدنيا الحقيرة القليلة الفانية.
Very important point that the Shaykh has here. He says it's imperative and it's befitting for the student of knowledge to ponder upon this. Because he says, فإنه يتعلم العلم بجهد كثير, because the student will be studying and learning and he'll be putting a lot of effort. Memorizing, learning, understanding. He doesn't get it, ask again, write, memorize. You're putting in all this effort to study. فلا يصرفه إلى الدنيا الحقيرة. So do not waste, يعني do not, what's it called? Do not يعني put all that effort for the sake of this lowly dunya. Right? That's a wasted effort. Don't put all that effort in for this lowly dunya. Al-haqira, that is, yani the haqir is something that is, what's the translation for it? It's something that is not trivial, but something that is not valuable. It's looked down upon. Right? Huh? Not only miserable, but something that is not looked at with loftiness. Something that is demeaned. Right? Something that is demeaned. So this dunya that is lowly, qalilatul faniya. It's little and it's temporary. It's going to perish eventually. It's not going to last forever. So why are you putting all that effort for something that is temporary, of no fa'idah, and on top of that, all of your actions will be ended, eventually what? Will be wasted, rendered null and void. While the akhirah is better. And that's where you're going to get the reward from. نعم. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
صلى الله عليكم. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: اتقوا الدنيا فوالذي نفس محمد بيده إنها الأسحر من هاروت وماروت. هي الدنيا أقل من القليل وعاشقها أذل من الذليل. تصم بسخرها قوما وتعمي فهم متحيرون بلا دليل. وينبغي لطالب العلم ألا يذل نفسه بالطمع في غير المطمع ويحترز عما فيه مذلة العلم وأهله، ويكون متواضعا وتواضعه بين التكبر والذلة والعفة كذلك، ويعرف ذلك في كتاب الأخلاق. أنشدني
نعم. So here he says قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, he brings a hadith and the hadith is not authentic, and the meaning of the hadith is اتقوا الدنيا, beware of the dunya. فوالذي نفس محمد بيده إنها لأسحر من هاروت وماروت. يعني that I swear by the one who Muhammad's soul is in his hand, that this dunya is more يعني it's لأسحر, يعني it's how do you translate that? Harut and Marut were the angels that the Quran mentioned, that they came down to the people and they told them that we have with us magic, and they showed them some magic and said don't believe in it. All right? So he's saying that the dunya is more tricky and it's more it will delude you and it will trick you and it'll make more tricks than Harut and Marut. Right? Now the hadith is not authentic, but in other words, the meaning of the statement is how the dunya is deceiving. Right? The dunya is one that deceives the person. The person will think and believe, it's going to last forever and it's never going to end, and it deceives the person. How fast does it go? How fast does this, how temporary are the enjoyments of the dunya? Right? And how temporary, right? Somebody might think, I have everything going for myself right now. Everything's going good, and then all of a sudden, they lose their job, they become sick, they're not healthy anymore. That's just the dunya. That's the reality of the dunya. So he's saying this in the context of, then why put all this effort in studying and seeking knowledge for this dunya that's trivial and insignificant? He says, and then he brings some lines of poetry. هي الدنيا أقل من القليل. It is this worldly, lowly life that is lesser than that which is little. It's less than that which is little. وعاشقها أذل من الذليل. And the one who desires it is lower than those who are lowly. تصم بسحرها قوما وتعمى فهم متحيرون بلا دليل. He says تصم بسحرها قوما وتعمى. With its tricks, its magic tricks and its deception, it completely blinds people. And it blinds the people in the dunya who are distracted by it, who are impressed by it. They're completely blinded from its reality. فَهُمْ مُتَحَيِّرُونَ. So they are completely lost, without any guide. They don't know where, they have no direction, they don't know where they're going. Why? Because they're immersed in the dunya. Right? So the person who has no direction is the one that has no concept of akhirah, afterlife. They think the dunya is what? The all, it's the end all, be all. So they are what? Lost in the dunya. Right? And subhanAllah, when a person immerses themselves in the dunya, and that itself is an uqubah. May Allah protect us. حتى إذا نسوا ما ذكروا به فتحنا عليهم أبواب كل شيء. Allah says about those who ignored the message and ignored the truth and ignored submitting to Allah, right? When they turned away and they forgot about the reminder, Allah says He opens up the dunya for them. He opens up the dunya for them. All of the pleasures, opens it up for them. حتى إذا فرحوا بما أوتوا أخذناهم بغتة. Allah says until they are happy and content with what they have, then they are all of a sudden what? Snatched away. This is what's referring to as sunnatul istidraj. You guys know what istidraj is? And the person is, they're given time. So Allah says, سَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah will seize them at a time when they don't expect it. But in the dunya, they're given, they're allowed to do their thing. Right? Allah says, وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ. Right? They're allowed to let go. They think they think they have the freedom to go. They're going, and then all of a sudden, when they least expect it, right? It's like the one who has the dog on the leash, right? And he makes the leash longer and longer and longer, right? The dog is normally used to a very tight leash, but now the leash has been made loose, very loose, all the way back there. So the dog starts moving, and he realizes what? Hey, I'm not stuck. So he starts going, and then all of a sudden, what does he think? Right? Maybe it doesn't happen with dogs. I've never owned a dog. None of you guys here probably have, Allahu alam. But you can say this about animals, camels, right? Sometimes they will do that. They will make the camel's tie a bit longer so that it can kind of walk around. So maybe the animal thinks, oh, I think I'm scot-free. And then they start going, and then all of a sudden, when they least expect it, what happens? They're pulled back. Right? That's a human being. They're immersed in the dunya. They think, oh, they can get away with it. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to whoever I want. I'm going to take whoever I want's life. I'm going to bomb whoever I want. I'm going to kill whoever I want. Who's going to stop me? Everything's going good. Our life is happy. We have all this money. Well, you know what I mean? It's you guys are the ones that are claiming to be on the truth, and you guys are the ones who are living a rough life. You guys must be the ones who are lost. All of that is what? Is a punishment for them without even realizing. Right? And the person, they're fooled to think, oh, this is everything, we're okay. Why is nothing happening to us and all the hardships happening to those who claim to be on the truth? Sakin, they don't understand that this itself is the ibtila. This itself is the part of the trial they're going through, and it's going to hit them when they least expect it. That's the reality of the dunya, deceiving the people. Right? وَيَنْبَغِي لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ أَنْ لَا يُذِلَّ نَفْسَهُ بِالطَّمَعِ في غير المطمع ويحترز عما فيه مذلة العلم وأهله. He says that it's also another quality that's important for the student of knowledge is that the student of knowledge should not humiliate themselves. The student of knowledge should not put themselves in a position of humiliation, right? By wanting and desiring lowly things that they don't need, right? You don't make yourself look desperate and in a state of humiliation. That's not what the student of knowledge should do. And don't confuse that with humility. And he'll talk about what humility and being humble is, which is important. So there's a difference between being humble and to humiliate yourself, right? طيب? So to humiliate yourself is to make yourself dhalil. Right? While humility is tawadu'. You have to be mutawadi'. وَيَكُونُ مُتَوَاضِعًا وَالتَّوَاضُعُ بين التكبر والذلة. He says, and being يعني متواضع, being humble, is between two extremes. One extreme is to be arrogant, متكبر, and the other extreme is to be ذليل, to carry yourself like you're in a state of humiliation. Right? That's another extreme. In between that is a person who's متواضع. والعفة كذلك. And also, عفوا, نعم. He says, والتواضع بين التكبر والذلة. والعفة كذلك. عفة is to be chaste, to keep yourself, protect yourself from anything that is compromising. ويعرف ذلك في كتاب الأخلاق. And how would you know these types of characteristics? From the books that have been written about akhlaq and character. That's why it's important that you study these books. كتب الأخلاق, كتب الآداب. So you know what are characteristics that are noble and what are characteristics that are that are immoral, that are lowly, that are not befitting for the student of knowledge, for the Muslim. طيب. أنشدني قرأت هذا؟ تفضل.
أحسن الله إليكم. أنشدني الشيخ الإمام الأستاذ ركن الدين المعروف بالأديب المختار شعرا لنفسه بالأديب المختار شعرا لنفسه إن التواضع من خصال المتقي وبه التقي إلى المعالي يرتقي ومن العجائب عجب من هو جاهل في حاله أهوى السعيد أم شقي أم كيف يختم عمره أو روحه يوم النوى متسفل أو مرتقي والكبرياء لربنا صفة له مخصوصة فتجنبنها واتقي.
He mentions another line of poetry from Ruknuddin, who's known as Al-Adib al-Mukhtar. Al-Adib is a person who's like the poet, that is Al-Mukhtar, who was chosen. He says, he mentioned lines of poetry where he said, إن التواضع من خصال المتقي, that indeed humility is from the qualities of the one who has taqwa. وبه التقي إلى المعالي يرتقي. And with that taqwa, the person will elevate to the highest to higher levels. ومن العجائب عجب من هو جاهل. And what is amazing, or the amazing affair, is how the ignorant person is impressed with themselves. Al-ujub is when the person is impressed with themselves, right? So that's the opposite of the person who has taqwa and ilm and wara will be somebody who is humble, while the one who's jahil is the one who is impressed with themselves. Oh, mashallah, I'm Dr. Hafiz so and so, I've done this, I've achieved this, and right? So he says, وَمِنَ الْعَجَائِبِ, what is the amazing is the situation of the ignorant one who is impressed with themselves. فِي حَالِهِ, in his situation, in his condition. أَهُوَ السَّعِيدُ أَمْ شَقِي, is he the one who's going to be, is he one who's happy or is he one who's miserable? أَمْ كَيْفَ يُخْتَمُ عُمْرُهُ أَوْ رُوحُهُ, or how is it that the person's life or their soul will be taken? How is their end going to be? The person who's impressed with themselves. يوم النوى نعم يوم النوى مستفل أو مرتقي, on that day, on the afterlife, are they going to be one who's going to be lowly, or there's going to be one that's going to be elevated? Are they going to be the ones who are elevated, or are they going to be from أسفل سافلين والعياذ بالله. والكبرياء لربنا صفة له. As for al-kibriya, right, he says that this is a characteristic and a sifa for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, you have the hadith of the Prophet when he mentioned, I'm forgetting the hadith now, but there's narrations mentioning about Ya uridai. I'm forgetting the narration right now, it's hadith Qudsi. Right? When Allah has mentioned that it's my cloak. طيب. مخصوصة فتجنبنها واتقي. So this is a characteristic that is unique for Allah in a way that's befitting His Highness and His Majesty Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So He's saying, as for the human being and the one who is muttaqi, they should stay away from being mutakabbir. Rather, they should be mutawadi' and they should be humble. قال أبو حنيفة
أحسن الله إليكم. قال أبو حنيفة رحمة الله عليه لأصحابه: عظموا عمائمكم ووسعوا أكمامكم. وإنما قال ذلك لئلا يستخف بالعلم وأهله. وينبغي لطالب العلم أن يحصل كتاب الوصية التي كتبها أبو حنيفة رحمة الله عليه ليوسف بن خالد السمتي عند الرجوع إلى أهله، يجده من يطلب العلم. وقد كان الأستاذنا شيخ الإسلام برهان الدين علي بن أبي بكر قدس الله روحه العزيز أمرني بكتابته عند الرجوع إلى بلدي فكتبته. ولا بد للمدرس والمفتي في معاملات الناس منه، وبالله التوفيق.
So the Shaykh, he mentions the statement of Imam Abu Hanifa alayhi rahmatullah, where he says, عظموا عمائمكم ووسعوا أكمامكم. He's referring to rahimahullah ta'ala the clothing that they wear, the turbans and the cloak that they wear to fix the sleeves and to lengthen the turbans. And then the Shaykh, the author, he says, وَإِنَّمَا قَالَ ذَلِكَ لِأَلَّا يَسْتَخِفَّ بِالْعِلْمِ وَأَهْلِهِ. He said, he's saying that Abu Hanifa said that so that the people, when they see them, they do not demean or put down the people of knowledge and knowledge. In other words, what Abu Hanifa is describing here was what was known at that time as the clothing that was kind of specific for the fuqaha, right? And this is a means of honoring and respecting the people of knowledge. We have this is something that is a phenomenon in the past and in the present, where you have certain style of clothing that is known to be worn by the imam, the mashayikh, the people of knowledge, so on and so forth. Whatever it might be, you might see countries with a certain, with Darul Ifta, whether it's in Egypt or in the Mamlaka or whatever it might be, they wear a certain style. The Azharis wear a certain style. So it's known that this is, there's a respect connected to that style of clothing, right? When you see that, what comes to your mind automatically is the respect and the ta'zeem of ilm and knowledge, right? Obviously, the brain's not going to compute when you see somebody dressed like that and then acting foolishly, right? There's an issue there now. What's this person doing? It's not funny. People might even become offended by that. What are you doing? Aren't you somebody who's a sheikh? Right? So for the objective of that, as he's saying, is so that people do not demean and the status of the knowledge and its people. And it's a means of ihtiram for ilm and its people. وينبغي لطالب العلم أن يحصل كتاب الوصية التي كتبها أبو حنيفة رحمه الله تعالى ليوسف بن خالد السمتي عند الرجوع إلى أهله. And he mentions a reference to a book, and this book is pretty much about the title of his Kitab al-Wasiyya, and the topic of it is advices, in this case of Abu Hanifa, to one of his students. And also we have a lot of books written by the scholars where a sheikh or a teacher will be advising his student, or a parent will be advising his son about knowledge, or so on and so forth. There's many examples of these types of books. And in there you'll find these types of statements that we're talking about the importance of your intention and what you're supposed to intend when you're seeking knowledge, how your mindset is supposed to be in terms of your intention, what you're supposed to focus on, what you're supposed to stay away from. So he's concluding the chapter by mentioning that this is something that we benefited from these books. He says, وقد كان أستاذنا شيخ الإسلام برهان الدين علي بن أبي بكر قدس الله روحه العزيز أمرني بكتابته عند الرجوع إلى بلدي فكتبته. He said that my teacher told me to write this book down. Right? In the past, they didn't have photocopiers. Right? So when they were recording a book, what would they have to do? If they want to preserve it, they have to copy it down. So he's saying, my sheikh told me to write down and copy that book. He mentioned earlier, Kitab al-Wasiyya. He said, that's an important book, make sure to write it down. فأمرني بكتابته عند الرجوع إلى بلدي فكتبته ولا بد. He says, I wrote it. And the author is saying that I wrote that book. He says, ولا بد للمدرس والمفتي في معاملات الناس منه. He says, and it is a book that is needed and it's required. It's a required book for the one who's studying, the one who's teaching, the mudarris, and the mufti, right? في معاملات الناس منه. يعني in that book they will learn about how to deal with and interact with the people. طيب. وبالله التوفيق. He concludes the chapter there, and we'll stop there inshallah ta'ala. On Wednesday we'll continue from the chapter about اختيار العلم والأستاذ والشريك والثبات. طيب. And we'll also, along with that, do تعظيم العلم وأهله. The two chapters are not that long, so we can combine them. Either way, in the upcoming class, we're going to be combining chapters. Some of them are a bit long, and most of them are quite short, but they're easy. As you can see, they're pretty easy to kind of read and go through. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue on Wednesday, inshallah ta'ala. We'll stop here for tonight. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بارك الله فيك. تفضل. دقيقة ما حفظت الأبيات. عيدها مرة ثانية. Say it again. فغيره. نعم. وعمل به زك. نعم. دقيقة. I have to confirm that. It doesn't come to my mind right now, the meaning. Give me a second. لحظة. Try to find the meaning of it.